The smell of aged paper and dust filled the air as Adam Carter flipped through the faded pages of a school ledger from 1994. He had always loved uncovering forgotten stories, but this time, something felt different. Something felt wrong. Buried between routine attendance records and academic reports, he found a single sheet tucked away. It wasn't like the others. It was handwritten, the ink slightly smudged, as if someone had been in a hurry or scared. The note read, "If you're reading this, something terrible has already happened. We tried to stop it. We failed. The truth is hidden, but not gone. Find room 306. Midnight. Alone." Adam's breath caught in his throat. Room 306 didn't exist. At least, not anymore. Adam was at Willow Creek High, a now abandoned school slated for demolition. As a history student, he had volunteered to archive old documents before they were lost forever. But now, this was no longer about history. This was a mystery. His heart pounded as he scanned an old blueprint of the school. Room 306 had once existed, but 30 years ago, it had been sealed off. No explanation. No records. Just gone. The questions swarmed in his mind. Why was the room hidden? Who wrote this note? What was supposed to happen at midnight? Adam had always been skeptical of ghost stories and urban legends, but something about this felt real. His curiosity got the best of him. He had to see for himself. That night, armed with only a flashlight, Adam returned to the school. The halls groaned with the weight of years. Paint peeled from the walls. The wind howled through broken windows. It was the kind of place where the past never really left. He followed the blueprint's instructions, walking past classrooms frozen in time. Then, at the farthest end of the second floor, he found it, a bricked-up wall where room 306 should have been. His breath quickened. Who hides a classroom? That's when he noticed the markings, barely visible under the dust. Claw-like scratches on the bricks. Deep gouges. As if someone had tried to get out. Then he heard it. A faint shuffling sound. Not from behind him. Not from above. From inside the wall. Adam's grip tightened on his flashlight. The sound was faint, just a whisper of movement, but it was enough to send a chill through his bones. Something was inside. He pressed his ear to the cold bricks. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. A slow, deliberate tapping from inside the wall. Adam staggered back, his breath quick and shallow. It could be rats. The building was ancient. Maybe it was just the structure settling. Maybe. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight flickered. The dim beam landed on something scratched into the floor near the base of the bricked-up wall. Letters. He crouched, brushing away the dust. The message was crude, uneven, as if someone had carved it in a hurry. "Help me. Find the tape." His heartbeat pounded in his ears. A tape? Adam knew he wasn't going to sleep that night until he figured this out. He sprinted back to the storage room where he had first found the ledger. The old filing cabinets were filled with forgotten records, attendance logs, teacher reports, student disciplinary files. He dug frantically, searching for anything about room 306. Then, in the bottom drawer, buried beneath stacks of yellowed paper, a dusty VHS tape. The label had long since faded, but scrawled in black marker were two words that made his stomach drop. Room 306 to 1994. His hands trembled as he took the tape. There was only one place left in town that still had a working VHS player, the old library archives. As he stepped outside into the cold night air, he had the overwhelming feeling that someone was watching him. And then, he heard the whisper, low, raspy, right behind him. "Don't watch it." He spun around. Nobody was there, but the school doors were now wide open. Adam's pulse pounded in his ears. The school doors had been locked when he left. Now they stood wide open, creaking slightly as if someone or something had just slipped through. He didn't wait to find out. Clutching the VHS tape, he bolted to his car and sped off toward the Willow Creek Public Library. The library was deserted at this hour, save for Mrs. Holloway, the elderly librarian who never seemed to leave. She barely looked up as he slipped into the back archives, where the old technology section remained untouched. Adam found an old VCR player hooked up to a flickering TV. He slid the tape in, took a deep breath, and pressed play. The screen crackled with static. Then, a dimly lit classroom. Room 306. Students sat at their desks, facing the camera. A teacher, her back turned, wrote something on the blackboard. The date in the corner read October 18th, 1994. Adam leaned in. Why was this recorded? Then, without warning, the lights in the video flickered. The students, previously chatting and smiling, froze. Some turned to look at the camera. Others looked at the closet at the back of the room. Adam's stomach clenched. The closet door was moving. A slow, deliberate creak. The teacher stiffened, her hand pausing mid-writing. The students now sat perfectly still, their expressions twisted in fear. Then, the screen glitched. The image flickered, warped, and suddenly, all the students were gone. Every desk empty. Only the teacher remained. But something was wrong with her face. The camera shook violently, the screen distorting as if the tape itself was rejecting what it was showing. And then, a scream. Loud. Piercing. The teacher turned, and Adam gasped. Her eyes were hollow sockets. Her mouth stretched open too wide. Her skin twisted, melting like wax. She lunged at the camera. Static. The tape snapped. The screen went black. Adam sat frozen, his breath ragged. Then, from the library's shadows, came a voice. A whisper. You shouldn't have watched that. Adam's breath caught in his throat. The whisper had come from behind him. He spun around, his hands clammy, his heart pounding so hard he swore the whole library could hear it. The archives section was empty. Rows of dusty bookshelves stretched into the dimly lit space, the air thick with silence. But something felt wrong. The whisper, he had heard it. Someone was here. The old Sirta television behind him suddenly crackled back to life. No tape. No power button pressed. But the screen flickered. A distorted image appeared, grainy footage of the library itself. Adam's stomach clenched as he recognized the exact aisle he was standing in. Then, the camera on the screen panned. Slowly, past the shelves. Toward him. A shadowy figure stood just a few feet away, in the next aisle over. Not moving. Just watching. Adam's breath hitched. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to move. He lunged around the aisle, empty. No one there. But something had changed. The books on the shelf nearest him were all missing. The entire row was bare, except for one book, an old, tattered journal placed neatly in the center. A chill ran down his spine. He reached out and picked it up. The cover read, Property of Hannah Strayer, Class of 1994. Adam's mind raced. The same year as the tape. He flipped the journal open, the pages brittle with age. The handwriting was small, shaky. He turned to the last entry, dated October 18th, 1994, the day room 306 vanished. The ink was smudged in places, as if the writer had been crying. I know what they did. They thought hiding the truth would erase it. But it's still here. It's always here. The walls remember. The school remembers. I hear them at night, the ones they took. They whisper to me now. I can't stay quiet anymore. If I disappear, please. Someone find room 306. The real one. Underneath. Underneath? Adam's mind reeled. What did she mean? Was there another room 306 hidden beneath the school? Before he could turn the page, a loud thud echoed through the library. Adam whipped around. The sound had come from the front desk. Mrs. Holloway, the librarian, was gone. Her chair was overturned. Her glasses lay shattered on the floor. And on the desk, in her place, sat something that made Adam's blood run cold. A single VHS tape. No label. Just waiting. Adam's fingers trembled as he reached for the unlabeled VHS tape. It was just sitting there, almost as if someone, or something, had left it for him to find. The library was silent. Too silent. Mrs. Holloway was gone. No sign of struggle. No footprints leading away. Just her shattered glasses and an overturned chair. Adam swallowed hard. He knew he shouldn't, but his curiosity burned brighter than his fear. He took the tape and slid it into the VCR. The screen flickered to life. Static. Then, a dark hallway. The footage was grainy, black and white. The camera was moving, creeping forward. The walls were lined with lockers, their doors rusted and dented. At the end of the hallway was a door. A familiar door. Adam's breath caught. Room 306. The door on the screen was slightly ajar. Something about it felt wrong, like the darkness behind it was alive, waiting. The camera kept moving. A hand, pale, shaking, reached out and pushed the door open. Inside, rows of desks sat abandoned, covered in dust. The chalkboard at the front of the room still had faint markings, as if someone had been writing recently. Then, the camera panned. In the back of the room stood the closet, the same one that had moved in the first tape. It was wide open now. The camera zoomed in. Inside the closet, something was hanging. No, not something. Someone. A girl. Her head slumped forward, long dark hair covering her face. Then, her eyes snapped open. Adam's stomach twisted. The girl's head turned sharply, almost unnatural in its movement. And then she spoke. Her voice was distorted, static-filled, but he could still make out the words. "You're not supposed to be here." Suddenly, the camera shook violently. The screen warped. The girl let out an ear-piercing scream. The footage cut to black. Adam sat frozen, his pulse thundering in his ears. Then, something flashed on the screen. A final frame. A single phrase, handwritten, smeared in dark ink. She never left. A noise made Adam jump. From behind him, near the aisles, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. He turned, his body stiff with fear. There, standing just beyond the last row of bookshelves, barely visible in the dim light, was a girl. Long dark hair, head tilted, watching him. Adam's blood turned to ice. The girl stood completely still, just beyond the last row of bookshelves. The dim light from the flickering TV screen barely illuminated her figure. She was young, no older than 16. Her long, dark hair hung in tangled strands, partially covering her pale face. Her dress was faded, stained with something dark near the hem. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just watched. Adam's throat went dry. His mind screamed for him to move, but his body refused to obey. Then, she took a step forward. The old wooden floor beneath her groaned. The air around Adam grew colder, like all the warmth had been sucked from the room. She never left. The words from the tape echoed in his mind. Was this her? The girl from room 306? His breath hitched as she took another step. Adam forced his legs to move, stumbling backward, nearly knocking over a chair. That's when she whispered, low, hollow, right behind him. You shouldn't have watched. Adam spun around, but no one was there. When he turned back toward the bookshelves, the girl was gone. His breath came in short gasps, his heart pounding like a hammer in his chest. The library was silent again. Too silent. Adam grabbed the VHS tape and the journal, stuffing them into his backpack. He didn't care if anyone saw him running. He had to get out. As he bolted for the exit, his eyes darted toward Mrs. Holloway's desk, still empty. No sign of her. No sign of anything. The door creaked as he shoved it open and stumbled into the cold night air. The town was eerily quiet, the street lamps flickering. His car was parked just across the street. He sprinted toward it, fumbling for his keys. Then, a reflection in his car window made him freeze. A figure standing behind him. The girl. But this time, she was smiling. Adam's breath stopped. The reflection in his car window was wrong. The girl wasn't just standing there anymore. She was smiling, a slow, unnatural stretch of her lips that sent ice down his spine. Her dark, hollow eyes locked onto his. Adam spun around. Nothing. The street was empty. The air was still. But the moment his eyes flicked back to the window, she was closer. Adam's pulse hammered against his ribs. He threw open the car door and jumped inside, shoving the key into the ignition. His hands were shaking so badly that it took him 3 tries to start the engine. The headlights flickered to life, illuminating the deserted street ahead. He forced himself to take one last look at the rearview mirror. No one was there. Had he imagined it? His grip tightened on the wheel. He needed to leave. Now. He pressed down on the gas, but as the car lurched forward, something slammed against the back windshield. Bang! Adam's heart stopped. A handprint, pressed against the glass. Small. Pale. Too many fingers. Adam didn't think. He floored the gas. The car screeched onto the road, tires skidding as he sped toward his apartment. His mind raced, replaying what he had seen, the tape, the girl, the whisper. And then, the journal. Find room 306. The real one. Underneath. What did that mean? Had the real room 306 been buried? Hidden? Where? He needed answers. But first, he needed to get inside. By the time he reached his apartment, his pulse was still erratic. The parking lot was empty. No sign of anything out of place. Adam slammed his car door shut and sprinted up the stairs. Every instinct in his body screamed, "Don't look back." When he reached his door, he jammed the key into the lock, shoving it open, and froze. His TV was on. The screen buzzed with static. The remote lay on the floor. He hadn't left the TV on. And then, the static flickered. The image shifted. A new video began playing. The screen showed his apartment. The exact angle from where he was standing. A chill wrapped around Adam's spine as he realized this wasn't an old tape. It was live. Something was recording him. Right now. Then, the camera on the screen moved, panning slowly. Not toward the front door. Not toward the window. But toward his closet. The door was open. And inside, something was moving. Adam's legs refused to move. His TV screen showed the live feed of his own apartment. But the camera had moved, panning toward his closet. And something inside was moving. The closet door, which had been just slightly ajar, now creaked open wider. Adam's breathing became shallow. His mind screamed at him to run, to get out, but his feet were rooted to the spot. The camera kept rolling. On the screen, the shadows inside the closet deepened, twisting unnaturally, stretching like something was about to step out. Then, a hand emerged. Small. Pale. Wrong. Adam's fight or flight response finally kicked in. He lunged for the TV, yanking the power cord from the wall. The screen went black. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, a soft creak behind him. The closet. Adam turned slowly. The door was now wide open. The darkness inside was thick, unnatural. It felt like it was watching him. And then, a voice. Low. Raspy. Right next to his ear. You brought me back. Adam bolted. He didn't stop to look. Didn't stop to breathe. He just ran. Down the hallway. Through the door. Out. He didn't even realize he was in his car until he heard the engine roar to life. His hands gripped the wheels so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had to leave. He had to go back. Not to his apartment. Not to the library. To Willow Creek High. To room 306. The real one. The school loomed in front of him, shrouded in darkness. The demolition crews had cleared out, leaving the building in its final days before it would be gone forever. Adam killed the engine and stepped out, his heart hammering. The journal's last entry echoed in his mind. Find room 306. The real one. Underneath. Underneath. His gut twisted as he remembered something. A rumor. Years ago, before the school closed, there had been a basement. An old storage level that was sealed off in the mid-90s. No one ever talked about why. Adam's hands shook as he pulled out his flashlight. He had to find it. He pushed open the rusted back door and stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with time. His footsteps echoed through the empty hallways. Then, he saw it. Near the back of the school, hidden behind collapsed lockers and broken furniture, a rusted trapdoor. Half covered in dust, but still there. Adam's stomach twisted. This was it. The real room 306 wasn't just hidden. It was buried. Taking a deep breath, Adam reached down and pulled the door open. A burst of cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of decay. His flashlight beam cut into the darkness, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. Somewhere deep in his gut, Adam knew whatever had been hidden here was never meant to be found. But he had no choice. Taking one final breath, Adam descended into the dark. Adam stepped onto the first stair. The wood groaned beneath his weight, sending a shiver through his spine. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp rot and something worse, something decayed. His flashlight flickered. He didn't want to go down, but he had no choice. The old journal had led him here. The tapes had shown him the past. And the whispering girl, she had followed him. There was no running anymore. His footsteps echoed as he descended, the darkness swallowing him whole. Then, he reached the bottom. A long corridor stretched ahead, lined with rusted lockers and abandoned desks. This wasn't just a basement. This was a forgotten part of the school. A place no one was supposed to find. Adam's breath hitched as his flashlight landed on something at the end of the hall, a door. Faded. Splintered. The number barely visible. Room 306. But this wasn't the same room 306 that had been bricked up on the second floor. This was older. Hidden. Buried. The real room 306. A low scratching noise came from behind the door. Adam's grip tightened on the flashlight. His heart pounded against his ribs. He wanted to turn back. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. But he had come too far. With a deep breath, he stepped forward and pushed the door open. The door groaned on its rusted hinges. Adam's flashlight cut through the dust-filled air, revealing a classroom frozen in time. Desks were scattered. Papers littered the floor. A blackboard stood at the front, smeared with chalk that had long since faded. But the room wasn't empty. No, it was filled with desks. And in every desk sat a student. Adam's breath stopped. The figures were motionless, their heads slumped forward, their faces obscured by shadows. He took a step closer, his pulse hammering in his ears. This wasn't possible. The school had been abandoned for decades. These students, they should be gone. And yet, they were here, sitting, waiting. Then, one of them moved. Adam stumbled back as a girl in the front row lifted her head. Her eyes were hollow, empty sockets, and she was smiling. We were never allowed to leave. The other students began to move. A low whisper filled the room, rising to a chorus of voices, dozens of them, overlapping, echoing. Find the tape. She's still here. You shouldn't have come. Adam's chest tightened. His flashlight flickered. Then, from the back of the room, a figure stood, taller than the students, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. The whispers stopped. The air went still. Then, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed Adam whole. And then, a voice. Not a whisper. Right next to his ear. Now you belong to us. The darkness was absolute. Adam couldn't see, couldn't breathe. He could only hear. Whispers surrounded him, dozens of voices overlapping, rising and falling like a ghostly chant. He found it. He shouldn't have come. Now he stays. His pulse pounded in his ears as something brushed against his arm. He whipped around. Nothing, but the breath, hot, cold, decayed, was still there, right next to him. Then, a hand wrapped around his wrist. Ice cold, bony, strong. Adam jerked back, but the grip tightened. You brought us back. The voices hissed in unison. His flashlight flickered once, twice. Then, it burst to life, revealing the nightmare around him. The classroom was no longer abandoned. The students were standing now, every single one of them, their heads tilted, their hollow eyes locked directly on him. Adam's chest heaved. His body screamed for him to run. Then, they moved. Not walking, not running, gliding. Their mouths opened, but no sound came out. Just the echo of a scream that never ended. The figure at the back of the room, the tall one, the wrong one, took a step forward. Adam ran. He didn't know where, just away. His feet pounded against the floor as he tore through the darkness, heart slamming against his ribs. The voices followed. The hands reached. The screams rose. Then, a door, barely visible, at the far end of the room. Open. Adam lunged through it, slamming it shut behind him. Darkness again. But this time, silence. He wasn't alone. Something breathed in the darkness with him. Adam slowly raised his flashlight. The beam illuminated a small, dust-covered desk, and sitting on it, a single, untouched VHS tape. The label was clear. New. 2 words written in fresh ink. The last recording. Adam's stomach twisted. Somewhere beyond the door, the whispers began again. And this time, they were laughing. Adam's hands trembled as he picked up the VHS tape. The last recording, the ink on the label looked fresh, as if someone had written it just minutes ago. But that was impossible. This place had been sealed for decades. A sharp bang on the door behind him made him jump. Then another. The whispers outside the room grew louder, a chorus of voices chanting, laughing, begging. Play it. See the truth. You can't leave. Adam's breath was ragged. He needed to get out. But deep down, he knew this tape held the answers. There, against the far wall, covered in dust and cobwebs, sat an old TV with a built-in VCR. The power light flickered weakly, as if it had been waiting for him. His fingers felt numb as he slid the tape in. The screen crackled. Static. Then, a timestamp appeared. October 18th, 1994. 11:57 p.m. Adam's stomach clenched. The exact date the students from room 306 disappeared. The camera was shaky, handheld. It followed someone, a young girl, no older than 16, running down the same basement hallway Adam had just come through. She was terrified. Her voice was panicked, breathless. "They're coming. They're coming." Oh God, they locked the door. The camera whipped around. Another girl was behind her, pressing herself against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. Then, a deep, guttural sound from somewhere in the dark. Not a whisper. Not human. The camera shook violently as the first girl screamed, "No. Please." Then, the screen glitched. The video jumped. The camera was now inside room 306. The students were sitting at their desks, but they weren't moving. Their heads hung forward, limp. Their shadows stretched unnaturally long against the walls, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. And at the front of the room stood a figure. Not a teacher. Not a student. Something else. Tall. Distorted. Its face was wrong, blurred, shifting like it couldn't decide what to be. It raised one long, thin hand, and the screen cut to black. Then, a new image. The camera was now facing the person holding it. Adam's heart stopped. It was him. Bolder. Eyes hollow. Face pale. He was whispering something, over and over. "I should have left. I should have left. I should have left." The screen glitched violently. And then, a final message appeared. A single sentence, scrawled in dark, smeared ink. "Now it's your turn." The TV shut off. Adam sat frozen. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, the door behind him unlocked. Slowly. A long, deliberate click. The whispers stopped. Silence. Then, a voice. Low. Familiar. His own. "Come and see." The door creaked open. And standing in the darkness beyond was himself. Adam's mind fractured. The door stood wide open, and in the darkness beyond, he saw himself. Same clothes. Same face. But the eyes, they weren't his. They were empty. Hollow. Staring. And then, it smiled. Not a normal smile. A slow, unnatural stretch, too wide, as if the skin around its mouth wasn't meant to move that way. "Come and see." The voice was his. But it wasn't. The other Adam lifted a hand, asterisk asterisk his hand, asterisk asterisk, and beckoned him forward. Adam's body screamed no, but his legs, they moved anyway. A force pulled him toward the open door, the air growing thicker, heavier, as if reality itself was unraveling. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. But none of this had been possible. The tapes. The whispers. The classroom full of students who shouldn't exist. And now himself, standing in front of him, waiting. The room around Adam warped. The walls stretched. The light flickered. Then, behind the other Adam, shadows shifted. Figures moved. Not students. Something else. Tall. Twisted. Wrong. Their eyes glowed faintly, their bodies half there, half not. They had been waiting for him. His twin stepped aside, motioning toward the darkness behind him. "Come inside." Adam's feet froze. His breath came in shallow gasps. "Come inside." Louder this time. More voices joined in. "Come inside. Come inside. Come inside." The room tilted. Adam's vision blurred. He felt himself being pulled forward. No. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to fight it. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. With everything he had left, he threw himself backward, breaking the pull. The whispers screeched. His twin's face contorted in fury. And then the door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Adam hit the floor, gasping for air. His mind spun, his body shaking. But he wasn't dead. He wasn't. Inside, the whispering had stopped. The air felt lighter. But he knew this wasn't over. He turned. His flashlight flickered across the dust-covered desk. The VHS tape was gone. But in its place was a single sheet of paper, handwritten, smudged with ink. Adam lifted it with trembling fingers. It read, "You were never supposed to find this. Leave. Now." His stomach turned. He looked back at the sealed door. The scratches on the surface. The faint handprints smudged into the dust. Some pushing in, some clawing out. He wasn't the first to come looking. But if he didn't leave now, he might be the last. Adam's hands trembled as he clutched the note. "You were never supposed to find this. Leave. Now." His heartbeat thundered in his chest. The whispers had stopped. The air felt lighter, but the presence, it was still here, watching, waiting. The sealed door loomed behind him, its surface marred with scratches, some pushing in, some clawing out. This wasn't just a room. It was a prison. Something had been locked inside, and now it knew his name. Adam's breath hitched as he heard it, a sound from inside the wall. A faint tapping. Slow. Deliberate. Tap. 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 Adam's chest tightened. Then the tapping stopped. A long, drawn-out silence. Then, bang. Something slammed against the door from the inside. Hard. The whole frame shuddered. Adam staggered backward. The whispering returned, but now it was different, angry, desperate. "Don't let it out. It belongs here. Run." Another bang. The doorframe splintered slightly. Adam turned and ran. His breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted down the dust-filled corridor, past the abandoned lockers, past the desks frozen in time. Behind him, the banging grew louder. Whatever was inside that room was trying to get out. Adam reached the stairs, his legs burning as he took them two at a time. The whispers chased him. Run. 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 He hit the top floor, bursting through the rusted door and into the main hallway. The school was silent again. Too silent. The second he stepped outside, a rush of cold air hit him like a wave. The building groaned behind him. The ground seemed to shift. And then, the lights inside the abandoned school flickered to life. Every single one. Adam froze, his breath turning to mist in the air. Through the shattered windows, he saw them. The students, sitting at their desks, waiting, and at the front of the room, a shadowed figure stood, watching him. Adam's stomach twisted. It wasn't over. It was never over. His eyes drifted to his car. He had to leave. He had to burn the journal, forget the tapes, never come back. But then, his phone buzzed. A single new message. No number, just 2 words. Too late. The school lights shut off. And from the darkness, Adam heard it, a whisper. "See you soon." Adam's fingers went numb as he stared at the phone screen. Too late. His body screamed at him to get in the car and leave, to burn the journal, to forget everything. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. A slow, cold breeze brushed against his neck. Adam whipped around. The school was pitch black again. The lights had shut off completely, but something moved in the windows. Shadows. They weren't students anymore. They were watching him. And then, his phone buzzed again. Another message. Turn around. Adam's breath caught in his throat. No, 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 no. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. His fingers shook as he slowly raised his head. He wasn't alone. A figure stood in front of his car. Still. Silent. It was him. The other Adam. The same one he had seen in the underground classroom. The twin that wasn't him. His own reflection, standing outside his car, watching him. Adam's pulse pounded in his ears. His other self didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. Then it tilted its head, just like the girl had, and smiled. Adam's breath shook. Then his phone buzzed again. A third message. Let me in. Adam ran. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He tore across the parking lot, yanking his car door open and throwing himself inside. The second the door slammed shut, he locked it, his breath ragged. His other self hadn't moved, still standing there, still watching. Then a handprint appeared on the windshield. Small. Wrong. Too many fingers. Adam's stomach twisted. Another handprint appeared. Then another. The glass fogged up, whispering voices hissing through the air, circling the car. Let us in. Adam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The engine roared to life. His headlights flooded the parking lot, and the other Adam was gone. No sign of him. No footprints. But the school was still full. The windows lit up again, one by one. Desks. Shadows. Figures standing. Watching, waiting. Adam slammed the car into reverse. He didn't look back. He didn't stop. He just drove. As the school disappeared in his rearview mirror, his phone buzzed one last time. One final message. See you soon. And then, his radio crackled to life. A voice whispered through the static. Not his own. Not the girl's. Something else. Something ancient. You found the truth. Now the truth will find you. The signal cut out. Silence. Adam gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. He wasn't safe. Not anymore. The road stretched before Adam, empty and endless. His hands clutched the steering wheel, his knuckles bone white. The whisper from the radio still echoed in his head. You found the truth. Now the truth will find you. His phone sat on the passenger seat, dark and silent now. But he knew it wasn't over. His foot pressed harder on the gas. He needed to get far away from that school, from those whispers, from himself. But as the miles passed, a deep, suffocating dread crawled through his chest. Something was wrong. The road felt too long. The night felt too quiet. The streetlights above flickered as he passed under them, each one blinking out, one by one, as if something was chasing the light away. And then his headlights caught something. A figure, standing in the middle of the road. Adam's heart lurched. It was a girl. Long dark hair. Head tilted. The same girl from the tape. She didn't move. Didn't flinch as his car sped toward her. Adam's hands jerked the wheel at the last second. The tires screeched as the car veered off the road. Crash. Metal crunched. His body slammed against the seatbelt, his vision blurring as the world spun. Then, silence. Adam's ears rang. His head throbbed. The car had come to a stop, nose down in a ditch. Steam hissed from the hood. His breath was shallow. His fingers twitched. He was alive. Slowly, he turned his head. The road was empty. The girl was gone. But when he looked in the rearview mirror, she was sitting in the back seat. Adam's breath caught. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, at something behind the car. Adam's throat tightened. He didn't want to turn around. The air shifted. The temperature dropped. And then, a soft breath against his ear. "You should have left when you had the chance." Adam whipped around. Nothing. The back seat was empty. His chest heaved. His pulse pounded. This wasn't just a haunting anymore. It was following him. No, it was inside. Adam reached for the car door, his fingers slipping on the handle. He needed to get out now. Then, a new sound. A slow, faint tapping. Not from outside. Not from the road. From inside the trunk. Tap. 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 Adam's stomach twisted. His shaking hand reached toward the release button on the dashboard. He shouldn't open it. He knew he shouldn't open it, but he had to know. His finger pressed the button. A soft click. The trunk popped open. Adam hesitated. The car was silent. The world was silent. He turned, climbing out of the driver's seat. His breath formed a thin mist in the cold night air. He stepped toward the trunk. The lid was ajar. A sliver of darkness inside. His fingers curled around the edge. He lifted it open and screamed. Adam's scream caught in his throat. Inside the trunk was him. His own body. Lying still. Motionless. Pale. Eyes wide open, but lifeless. His stomach lurched. His mind shattered under the weight of what he was seeing. How? How? He stumbled back, his hands trembling, his breath coming in sharp, broken gasps. But then, the body blinked. Adam's chest seized. He wanted to run, wanted to move, but his legs felt nailed to the ground. The corpse twitched. Then, in a slow, jerky motion, it began to sit up. The lifeless version of himself lifted its head, its glassy eyes locking onto Adam's. Then, it smiled. "You finally found me." Adam's breath hitched. The body in the trunk moved faster now, its head twisting unnaturally as its lips stretched too wide. Then, it lunged. Adam staggered back, slamming the trunk shut with all his strength. Bang! The air around him shifted. A deep, guttural laugh echoed from inside. Low, hollow, mocking. Adam whirled around, sprinting back to the driver's seat. His fingers fumbled with the keys, his pulse hammering so loud he could barely think. The car refused to start. No, 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 no. His hands trembled as he turned the key again. The engine sputtered, coughed. A second voice whispered from behind him, inside the car. "You can't escape yourself." The rearview mirror tilted on its own. Adam's reflection wasn't his own anymore. It was smiling. Then, the back door unlocked. The handle moved. Something was getting in. Adam didn't think. He just acted. He slammed his foot onto the gas. The car roared to life. The back door flew open, but Adam was already speeding down the road, gravel kicking up behind him. The whispers grew distant. The temperature rose. And then, silence. Only the sound of his own ragged breathing remained. But he knew. He wasn't alone. This wasn't over. Because when he glanced in the rearview mirror again, his reflection was still smiling. Adam's hands clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles bone white. His reflection in the rearview mirror wasn't just smiling anymore. It was watching him, mouth stretched wide, unblinking. It wasn't copying him. It wasn't him. Adam's breath came in shallow gasps as he stared at it, too afraid to blink, too afraid to look away. The car's interior was dark, lit only by the pale glow of the dashboard. The radio crackled softly, static, whispers buried beneath the noise. And then, the reflection spoke. Its lips moved, but no sound came out. Adam's chest tightened. His fingers twitched. No, he muttered the word under his breath. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the reflection tilted its head. Its mouth stretched wider. It was saying something. Adam's pulse hammered. What was it saying? A single word. Over and over. He couldn't hear it, but he could read it. His stomach twisted, because the word his reflection was mouthing was, "Look." Adam's breath caught in his throat. His hands trembled. No. The reflection's head snapped back upright, and now it was laughing. No sound, no voice, just the silent, contorted motion of laughter as its body shook, its mouth open wide in silent mockery. Then, a new sound. Not from the mirror, not from the radio, from the back seat. A slow, rhythmic breathing. Adam's chest seized. No, no. He was alone. He had been alone the whole time. But as he stared at his grinning reflection, it wasn't looking at him anymore. It was looking behind him. Adam's breath shook. He could feel it now. The presence. The cold air pressing against the back of his neck. Something was there, sitting directly behind him. The road stretched ahead. Empty. Endless. But his hands wouldn't move. The breathing grew louder. Then, a single whisper. Low. Hollow. Right behind his ear. I told you, you can't escape yourself. A cold hand touched his shoulder, and Adam screamed. Adam's scream ripped through the silence. His entire body lurched forward, his hands jerking the wheel as the car swerved dangerously across the empty road. But the hand, cold, wrong, too real. It was still there. Fingers tightened around his shoulder, pressing down as if rooting him in place. His instincts screamed at him to move, to run, to fight. But his body wouldn't listen. Then the voice came again, low, hollow, right beside his ear. Stop running. Adam's breath came in short, ragged gasps. His vision blurred. His arms felt heavy, his grip on the steering wheel slipping. He could see it now. Not in the mirror. Not in the corner of his eye. It was beside him, sitting in the passenger seat. It looked like him, but it wasn't him. Its eyes were too dark, its skin too pale. And the smile never left its face. Adam's throat tightened. His pulse pounded against his skull. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't. The grip on his shoulder tightened. I can make it real. Adam's vision flickered. The road in front of him twisted, shifting like a glitch in reality. And then the car engine died. Everything shut off. The lights, the dashboard, the world. Silence swallowed everything. And in the absolute blackness, the last thing Adam saw was his own face. Smiling. Then, nothing. A gasp. Adam bolted upright, his body drenched in cold sweat. His heart pounded violently. His lungs ached as he gulped in breath after breath. He was. Where? He blinked, his vision unfocused. A room. Dim. Dusty. The scent of old wood and decay filled his nostrils. He turned his head, too fast, too dizzy. Desks. A chalkboard covered in faint writing. A classroom. Adam's breath hitched. No, no. This wasn't his car. This was room 306. But it wasn't just any version of room 306. It was the one from the tapes. The one that shouldn't exist. The one buried underneath the school. A slow, rising horror crawled through his veins. No, no, this isn't real. Then, a chair creaked behind him. Adam's stomach twisted into knots. He wasn't alone. He turned slowly, and at the back of the classroom, something moved. A figure, sitting at one of the desks. Still, waiting. Adam's breath came out shaky. Then, the figure lifted its head. Dark, hollow eyes stared back at him. A slow, knowing smile stretched across its face. And then, in his own voice, it spoke. I told you. You were never supposed to leave. The classroom door slammed shut, and the lights went out. The darkness swallowed Adam whole. His breath came in short, panicked gasps as the whispering returned. But now, it was different. It wasn't just voices. It was laughter. A chorus of giggles and distorted chuckles that sent ice racing down his spine. He stayed, he stayed, he stayed. Adam's pulse pounded. He pressed himself against the desk, his fingers digging into the old wood. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Then, the lights flickered back on, and the room was full. Every seat, every desk, occupied. The missing students of room 306 were back. But they weren't alive. They sat motionless, their heads tilted at unnatural angles, their eyes hollow, their lips stretched into identical smiles. And at the front of the room, standing where the teacher should have been, was Adam. Or rather, the other Adam. The thing that had followed him. It smiled, stepping forward, placing a cold, pale hand on his shoulder. Class is in session. Adam's vision blurred. His mind fractured. And as the whispers surrounded him, swallowing him whole, he finally understood. The school. The tapes. The door that should have never been opened. It was never about finding the truth. It was about becoming part of it. Adam tried to scream, but he couldn't. His mouth moved, but the sound never came. His body froze, his limbs locked in place. The students turned toward him. Their smiles widened. And in that moment, Adam became one of them. Another forgotten student. Another whisper in the dark. And room 306 waited for its next visitor.